I see the born of no return. Sister, hey now, can't you see we're rushing for the end? I see the point of no return. Now see the point of no return. It's just
Okay, good evening, everybody. It's Tuesday again. It's already coming up on the end of March. I think I've said it before, but I'll tell you, the time-space continuum, I think those darn anal-probing gray space alien dudes must be messing with it. They must be tweaking that time-space continuum. You know, that's all they're zipping in and out of our atmosphere. It's probably causing all those ozone holes, too, and I think we ought to blame them and send them the bill for the carbon taxes for global warming. What do you think of that? Can we get away with it? You are listening to Wide Awake News on the Rents Radio Network. My name is Gary Hendershot, and yeah, for about the next hour or so, I'm going to be barking at the moon as if I knew what to do about it, you know. Hey, you got to laugh about it. You know, it's one of those things. If you don't laugh about it, you'll cry. You know, it's been kind of a slow week in the news when one of the headline items is Jack Nicklaus getting a medal from the Congress for being a golfer. I don't know what that's all about, and frankly, I'm not sure I care. But I guess the biggest news item of the day is probably a very unfortunate item, and I'm not going to laugh about this one. 150 people lost their lives in a tragic airline incident. Not really sure exactly what happened, but I can give you kind of a timeline here. Flight 9525 of the Germanwings airline. It's a Airbus 320, an airplane that's not known to just fall out of the sky. I mean, this is a fairly reliable airplane. It's been in service for quite a number of years. Now, this Germanwings outfit, they're kind of the low-budget offshoot of the German airline Lufthansa. They took off from Barcelona, Spain at about 10 a.m. their local time. They were scheduled to arrive in Dusseldorf, Germany, about an hour and 49 minutes later. Sometime around 11:49 is when they were expected. The airplane was flying at about 34 to 38,000 feet, which is the normal cruising altitude for this airplane, when the pilot did send out a distress signal. Now, there was no indication of what might have been the problem. All we do know for sure is that the plane started to nose in a fairly rapid descent that took about 6 to 8 minutes, and that it apparently crashed in the French Alps in a crevasse between two mountain peaks. French officials placed the location of the crash near the French mountain village. I'm going to try to pronounce this. You French speakers out there, please have mercy on a poor old southern boy with straw for brains. It's kind of hard for me to pronounce this. Digne-les-Bains. Digne-les-Bains. Digne-les-Bains is a remote village that is hard to access, about 30 miles north of the well-known city of Nice. MSNBC reports that debris has been discovered 50 miles away. The plane crashed between two mountain peaks in a crevasse. Now, early reports are that something catastrophic happened. Nobody's really sure what. The Airbus A320 was traveling at high altitude when air traffic control sent out the distress signal 7700, which is equivalent to a mayday call. The pilot did not send out the distress signal. However, apparently air traffic control noticed something was a little unusual. Airline controls report that they lost the plane signal at 6,800 feet. Something catastrophic must have happened to incapacitate the pilot from maintaining control over the airplane. The Associated Press has reported the owner of the French Alpine camping ground near where this plane came down says he heard a series of loud noises in the air before a Germanwings passenger plane carrying 150 people crashed to the ground. There were a number of school children on board, along with two of their teachers. It's believed that 45 of the passengers on board were Spanish. Apparently a very well-known opera singer, also among the dead. And for right now, I make this in big, bold headlines, for right now, experts do not believe that terrorism is involved. Now, on this issue, one of the reasons why terrorism was not involved is in big headlines is because it appears that MSNBC spent about 5 minutes of airtime today stressing over, whether hackers, cyber terrorists might have somehow gained remote control over this airplane and crashed it into this mountain. Now, this is the meme that has been put forward by our beloved dinosaur corporate-owned media. So, on this one, it's real convenient for them to have a boogeyman they can wave in front of you. It seems that the Department of Eternal Fear promotion are, you choose which one of our three-letter boys you might want to ascribe that to. We certainly have the Ministry of Truth, and I think we have the Ministry of Eternal Fear-mongering as well. But they would like you to have in the back of your mind, they would like to plant the seed in the back of your mind that a disaster such as this may indeed have been caused by cyber terrorists because they wish to control the internet, and that would give them a good excuse to do it. Bottom line is we've got a terrible tragedy here where an airplane with 150 people in it crashed into a mountain in southern France. For those of you watching the video feed, you can see over my shoulder a picture. I mean, most of the debris from this airplane is not much bigger than a phone book, so and it's spread out over a considerable area. So the impact was apparently pretty much devastating. Apparently this, let's see, this is an eyewitness report. We saw an aircraft that had literally been ripped apart. The bodies are in a state of destruction. There is not one intact piece of wing or fuselage. So, yeah, there's at least 150 families out there that will be mourning their dead. And to use an incident like this as a means of shaking yet another boogeyman in front of the public to get them all excited and keep them in fear, seems downright cynical to me, but that apparently is what's on the minds of many. How'd the last week go for all you folks out there? I know some of the folks up in the Northeast got yet more snow. We're now supposedly in springtime. I've yet to be able to throw the windows open and have a night of sleep where I had nice cool breeze blowing through the bedroom. Still depending on heat. And I'm south of the Mason-Dixon line, so I'm wondering how this global warming is working out for you folks. How was it where you are? It's got to keep that in mind. I'm still going to blame the anal probing gray space aliens. I think them running their spaceships through our atmosphere. That's what's punching holes in the ozone layer, and that's what's causing all that global warming. And I think we ought to send the carbon tax bill to those guys. I want to create an internet meme, carbon taxes for the anal probing gray space alien dudes. Yeah. I can't afford it, so let's send the bill to those guys. We've been asking a number of times if American voters were ready for Hillary in 2016. Now, Hillary's got a lot on her plate right now. I'm not going to beat a dead horse anymore. I mean, she's still got to fend off all the accusations over her email gate situation. Now it's come out that apparently a lot of folks in the State Department were using Hillary's private mail server. Apparently they had the secret back channel email transactions going on, and nobody has yet come forward and said for sure whether perhaps classified information was being stored on Hillary's home mail server. There's a lot about the situation that really stinks. And I look back in history at how, Nixon got in a whole lot of trouble for some missing 16 minutes of tape or something like that, and here's 30, 40, 50,000 emails missing, no telling whether classified material was being stored on her private home email server. And yet, it appears she's getting a pass for this. But, at least for right now, Hillary's under a lot of pressure. So I'm going to leave her alone. I figure, she's got enough problems right now. So what are the alternatives? Suppose the Democrats are just crazy enough to hit us up with a Hillary Clinton. Okay. Well, I can't vote Democrat. Maybe I can vote for the Republican. Now, wait a minute. For the longest time, they've been talking about running Jeb Bush as the Republican candidate. Well, wait a minute. I've had enough of Clintons. I've had enough of Bushes, and you're going to insult my intelligence by making me choose between a pile of poo-poo or a pile of doo-doo. I'm getting pretty tired of going into the voting booth, holding my nose and choosing the one who stinks the least. I'm bored with that. Can't you guys come up with something a little different than yet another Clinton or yet another Bush? Enter a Texan named Ted Cruz. Now, Ted Cruz, bless his heart, Israel can do no wrong. This guy has got, a little bit of a libertarian bend to him, and some from the Tea Party libertarian caucus within the Republican Party are just trotting Ted Cruz out saying, hey, he's going to save us. He's going to save us. All right. Now, listen, I'll tell you right now, if the Democrats run Clinton and the Republicans run Ted Cruz, I will probably do what I usually do. I will go to the polls and I will write in Minnie Mouse. I figure, a cartoon character could not do worse than either one of these two players. Ted Cruz is an unabashed supporter of this Israel Can Do No Wrong program. He's basically a neocon in libertarian clothing. This guy would be every bit as bad as another Bush. Now, so far, Rand Paul has not announced. But he has come out and clearly given the differences, although he and Ted Cruz agree on some issues. And hey, Rand Paul has been down to the Wailing Wall wearing a little yarmulke, kissing up to the Israelis. So, he's no charmer either. He's not going to, save us from ourselves. The problem is, so many of you, and I blame you, so many of you out there seem to be waiting for Superman or Green Lantern to come swooping in and save you, or maybe them little gray anal probing space alien dudes. I don't know what you're waiting for, but everybody seems to be waiting for somebody else to swoop in on a white charger and just save you from yourselves. And as long as you're waiting for politics as usual to present you with a president that's going to magically solve all the problems, you're going to be disappointed. And I will continue to be here bitching and complaining about it like I could really do anything about it. How many of you still have money in one of the major banks? How many of you are still tacitly supporting the system that you claim to be against? How many of you only accept U.S. dollars as compensation for your labors? How many of you have made it known to your clients and or employer that you might accept other forms of just compensation for your work? As long as they got you by your wallet, they got you. And if you think Ted Cruz is going to save you, well, you probably believe in the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and unicorns with rainbows flying out of their butts. All right. Enough U.S. politics, You can only take so much of U.S. politics. How many of you have heard of something called Jade Helm? Jade Helm. Does that ring any bells with anybody out there? Have you heard about it? Realistic military training exercise expands to as many as 10 states. Realistic, in quotes, realistic. Realistic military training exercise expands to as many as 10 states. The U.S. military has quietly added more states to its 8-week Jade Helm joint training drill, originally designated to take place in 7 southwestern states. Speaking of the exercise at the Brazos County Commissioner's Court in Texas last month, Jade Helm operations planner and retired Green Beret Thomas Meade told an audience that the drill, which will run from July 15th to September 15th, will now include the states of Mississippi and Florida as well. The exercise is actually an 8-week exercise taking place across 7 states. As you can see right here, it spans the whole southwest of the United States. We've also added Mississippi and Florida, and we have a group. We'll have Navy SEALs that'll be conducting targets and training down in the Mississippi area. Meet also realistic training drills here in the United States. Interesting. These fellers appear to be training to subjugate state and local governments. That appears to be what they're training to do. Civilians to gain their trust and understanding of the issues. We're the good guys. We're wearing American uniforms. Now get in your house and shut up. Oh, and if you've got any guns, you had better turn them over. Remember Katrina? You remember Katrina when the National Guard was going house to house in the areas that were not flooded out and confiscating people's firearms. Remember that? See, the problem with a lot of you out there is you have a very short attention span. You do not remember what happened 6 weeks ago, let alone 6 months or 6 years ago. The United States has been practicing for the subjugation of state and local governments for many, many years. And now they're right up in our face about it, doing realistic training drills throughout the South. You think they heard somebody singing Dixie and they decided that was a terrorist activity, and this is a show of force to keep you Southern boys from cleaning your muskets? Hey, keep your powder dry. I've got to bug out of here for a couple moments while the studio sells some goods. I'll be back right after these important commercial announcements with some more barking at the moon. Alrighty, and we're back from that blatantly commercial interruption to the evening's festivities. Let's see now. What hot item in the news? You know, I think last week I talked a little bit about how one of the ways the United States is kind of keeping afloat, you know, and one of the bright spots in the economy is the industry of banking. You know, this is moving piles of money, you know, from one pile to another. And of course, every time you move a pile of money from one point to another, you get to take a little piece, and that's added to the gross domestic product, and that makes the GDP look like, hey, you know, the United States is in good shape. Look at all this business activity going on here. The problem is when all you're really doing is moving money from one pile to another, nothing is being produced, nothing is being sold. There is no real economic activity going on there. But, you know, if Vietnam wants to buy something from the Philippines, and to do the transaction, they have to go somewhere and buy some U.S. dollars to give to the guys in the Philippines to do the transaction. That means that a U.S. banker got himself just a little piece of the action. He got to dip his nose a little bit, you know, just a taste, you know. He don't want much. He just wants a taste. And it's the fact that the U.S. dollar has been pretty much recognized as the global commerce currency that has really kept the U.S. afloat. Now, I understand that these financial transactions between nations do not benefit you at all. They certainly do not benefit me. The 99% of us out here who are trying to squeak by and trying to make a living, trying to hustle a gig there, here, and everywhere we try just to keep the mortgage paid, doesn't help us a bit. But it sure looks good on the books, because bankers can record a financial transaction every time Vietnam buys a little something from the Philippines, or the Philippines buys a little something from Japan, or whatever. So, you know, as far as that 1% at the very top of the pyramid, particularly those Wall Street boys, you know, as far as they're concerned, this preeminent position of the U.S. dollar as the global medium of exchange is a great deal, because every time anybody does anything, we get our little piece of the action. Okay? Onto the stage comes this upstart nation called China. Now, you all know about China? You know, they're the guys that Clinton sold all of our ballistic missile technology, too, back when he was around. Nixon went over and shook hands with Mao, I think, or actually the guy who took over from Mao. And, there was a warming of relations with China. And since that time, much of the manufacturing that used to be centered here in the United States, particularly in the semiconductor industries, many high-tech industries, seems to have found its way across the Pacific Ocean to China. And the Chinese, being very frugal people, they have amassed a tremendous pile of money, much of it U.S. dollars, and in the form of treasury bonds. Well, now, China is probably one of the strongest economies in the world, and they wish to compete on the global stage. China has announced that it will be forming their version, if you will, of the International Monetary Fund. Now, the International Monetary Fund is where nations go to borrow money. One of the reasons why Greece is in such a bad way is because they have borrowed a lot of money from the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund, and at this point they're stretched to where they can't even hardly pay the interest. But that aside, China may come to the rescue. Now, obviously, it's not in the United States' interest for anything to be used as a global currency other than the U.S. dollar. If enough countries started trading amongst themselves using, say, the Chinese yuan, and everybody, if Vietnam wanted to buy something from the Philippines, instead of buying some dollars to do the transaction, they had to buy some yuan, that would cut the U.S. bankers out of their piece of the action, and that would not be a happy, joy moment. So, the United States has steadfastly lobbied all of its trading partners, hey, you had best not be trading in anything but U.S. dollars. As a matter of fact, it may have been intransigence over the use of anything other than U.S. dollars for trade that got us embroiled in little fracases like Iraq, possibly Libya. It may be one of the reasons why we're rattling our sabers at Venezuela. Needless to say, there have been numerous wars fought by the United States for God, country, mom, and apple pie, and Wall Street's little piece of the action. Okay? So, what's the United States to do as not only, small third world nations in Southeast Asia join up to do business with China and their version of the International Bank or the International Monetary Fund, but all of a sudden some stalwart allies like the UK, France, Germany, guys who would normally be, on our side. What's the United States to do if all of a sudden it starts to lose its preeminent position as the global currency of the world? Hey, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. Washington and the World Bank have no choice but to cooperate with Beijing on the new China-led development bank. The U.S. has changed its tune after first opposing its allies cozying up to China. This is a gigantic concession on the part of the U.S. that it is not the world's only superpower. It appears that cooler heads have indeed prevailed. The United States may indeed cooperate with China rather than waging war over their loss of preeminent position. Now, pardon me for being cynical, but, it appears that the United States is going to be accepting of the fact of life that China has a major role to play on the world stage. The United States is no longer the financial powerhouse that it was many years ago. When you think about it, why would all these nations want to have warehouses full of U.S. dollars? If they grab a couple truckloads of U.S. dollars and bring them here to the United States, what can they buy? I mean, hookers and blow? I mean, is there anything of value produced here in the United States that they could buy and take back home with them? I mean, anything? Frankly, other than weapons of war, there is very little produced in the United States that other nations really want to buy. But boy, if they had a couple warehouses of Chinese yuan, there's all kinds of goodies they can buy with those yuan. So yeah, perhaps cooler heads will prevail, or is this just to give the Chinese a false sense of security? I'm hearing the music. I've got to step out of here for a few moments. I'll be back right after these important commercial messages. Alrighty, once again, we're back from that break, and that will be the last commercial interruption for the evening. Except, as I'm reminded, for the folks watching this on the live video feed, I understand that I've got a few in the chat room that are fussing a little bit about the ads that Ustream likes to embed in my video production. Sorry about that, folks, but to broadcast this thing without those advertisements would cost me many times what my productions generate in terms of revenue. I mean, my broadcasts generate zero revenue, and it costs about $750 a month to get ad-free broadcast time. You know, one of the guys that we love to hate is a fellow by the name of George Soros. You know, I mean, there's not a whole lot to like about this guy. I mean, if there's somebody who is approaching Emperor Palpatine status in the United States of America, it's probably George Soros. The guy carries a lot of baggage. He's not a nice man. But when it comes to the financial landscape, a lot of people, you know, when George speaks, a lot of people listen. So when George Soros warns that Greece is going to go down the drain, a lot of folks, you know, they're paying attention to that. Let's see what old George had to say. Right now, we are at the cusp, says billionaire George Soros on Bloomberg TV. The chances of Greece leaving the euro area are now 50-50, and the country could go down the drain. The 84-year-old fears that talks between Greece and the institutions could break down, adding that Greece is a long-festering problem that was mishandled from the beginning by all parties, concluding that the chances of Greece leaving the euro area are now 50-50 and the country could. Finally, Soros notes what worries him most is, of all places, Ukraine. I wonder why. You know, Greece, you know, just flush. You know, interesting thing, you know, a lot of folks are saying that if by chance Greece does indeed abandon the euro and remove itself from the European Union, that perhaps Italy, Spain, Portugal, and potentially even France might not be far behind. So, you know, there are many people out there who consider the failure of Greece to be the first domino. And they're worried that, you know, it could indeed destroy the entire European Union. On that one, you know, you're going to have to consider and make up your own damn mind. I don't pretend to be any smarter than you are. You know, that's probably, you know, over my pay grade. That's the type of thing that we would hope a multi-billionaire like George Soros might have some clues on. Anyway, he continues that it's now a lose-lose game, and the best that can happen is just barely muddling through. Now, Greece's prime minister, we talked about this some time ago. Greece has got a new party in there. It's kind of a, left-leaning socialist agenda type party. And they've been cozying up to Russia, and Russia's been cozying right back. I mean, you've got this pushing and shoving between the Russian alliances and the European alliances for what's referred to by the uppas as spheres of influence. Greece has been in the sphere of influence of the United States and the EU. The United States has recently moved the lines on sphere of influence a little bit towards Russia by, shall we say, acquiring a fairly large chunk of Ukraine. It would be kind of a feather in Russia's cap if they could move the lines a little bit into the EU's territory by acquiring Greece, potentially Italy, potentially Spain, Portugal, maybe even France, by acquiring those countries for their sphere of influence. This is the grand chess game that's being played by that upper 1%. It's kind of like as a kid, did you ever play a board game called Risk? That's kind of what's going on. The problem is, if there's just one misstep, if one of the players does something stupid, such brinksmanship has been known to devolve into a real shooting war. But the negotiations between the Syriza, that's the political party that's currently in charge of Greece, government and the institutions help financing the Greece economy, the European Commission, European Central Bank, International Monetary Fund, could result in a breakdown, leading to the country leaving the common currency area. Basically, Greece could, if they chose to do so, default on their debt to the International Monetary Fund and the European Community, and basically just said, we're out of here. We're going to cozy up to Russia and do a deal with them. Could happen. It's gone back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was just a couple of weeks ago I was reporting that this Syriza party had basically caved to the International Monetary Fund and got $1.5 billion to keep them afloat. Well, that money only lasts so long, and it appears that sometime late in April, that money's going to be gone. So once again, Greece is left with two possibilities. Do we go back to the International Monetary Fund with our hat in hand and beg for some more, or do we just say, why bother? This is a lose-lose scenario, and frankly, we've been offered a much better deal with the Russians anyway. Here again, on that one, you're going to have to consider and make up your mind. Now, I had a little fracas recently. The government of the United States was discussing working out a deal with the nation of Iran over their nuclear aspirations. Now, even though most intelligence communities, at least the public information that's come out, have indicated that the Iranians are not interested in producing nuclear weapons, not at this time anyway. But yes, they are interested in having nuclear power plants for production of electricity. They'd also like to be in the medical isotopes business. They'd like to be able to create cobalt isotopes and other isotopes that are used in medicine. Right now, the only nation in that region that's able to provide such medical isotopes is Israel. So if the Iranians were able to get into the game and compete with Israel, yes, Israel does now. They might have to be a little bit more aggressive in their pricing because now they would have a competitor in the region that they'd have to bid against. So I can understand why it's certainly not in Israel's financial interests to allow Iran to have nuclear power plants and be able to produce medical isotopes and even nuclear fuel rods, which the Iranians have high hopes of being able to sell to other nations in the world. Iran does have native deposits of uranium. They do not need anybody's permission to mine their homegrown uranium, refine it into nuclear fuel, and produce nuclear fuel rods for sale on the open market. I mean, this is something that the United States does. This is something that Japan does. This is something that France does. This is something that Russia does. And this is something that Israel does. Now, if Iran wishes to engage in that business activity, there are no international laws against it. As a matter of fact, because they are signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, in theory, the United States should be offering them technical assistance. The United States should, under international law and treaty obligation, help the Iranians achieve their goals. Israel, though, has been intransigent on this. They swear up and down that just like Saddam Hussein, this happened, in the early 90s when Saddam in Iraq was building a nuclear power plant, and Israel said, "Oh no, he's got a weapons manufacturing facility underneath that nuclear plant," and Israel unilaterally flew in and blew up his nuclear reactor that the Russians had just finished building. Years later, they excavated the remains of the nuclear plant. There, it was a nuclear plant. It was a nuclear power plant. Okay. Israel's now making the same claims about Iran. Now, look, I'm not making any excuses for Iran. The people who run Iran are jerks. Okay, they are Class A jerks, and it would not surprise me if they don't have some low-level activity going on, researching a capability to produce nuclear weapons. If you had a very belligerent little nation not too far away from you who kept pounding on the table saying, we're going to go over there and kick your ass, we're going to go over there and kick your ass, and you knew for a fact that they had nuclear weapons, wouldn't you, in the back of your mind, be thinking, boy, maybe I need one of them big sticks too. Those boys might actually come over here and drop a nuke on us. Maybe if we had one or two of them to threaten them with, it'd keep them at home. So, however, the intelligence communities of the United States and even Israel have reported that, at least for now, the Iranians have no active nuclear weapons program going on. So the United States felt it was appropriate to engage the Iranians in discussions, and frankly, the deal that was being discussed was pretty benign. I mean, I don't think there was any major problems with it. But needless to say, the Israelis felt compelled not just to spy on the discussions going on between the Congress and the White House. Yes, spy. Our ally Israel was actually spying on us. But they saw fit to feed rather sensitive information that the United States would consider secret to the Congress as they discussed the treaty. So, how did we find out they were spying on us? Well, because we were spying on them. Hey, I'm hearing the music. That's it for me this week. I'll be back next week to do some more barking at the moon. Y'all have a good evening now. Yes, I must remember to push the button so I can get my mic hot here. Well, let's see. Iran has always played by the rules, not so much with Israel. The stuff is getting interesting. Or let he who is without sin. Yeah. Yeah, I can talk. See, it's safe to talk bad about Iran. I can call the guys who run Iran jerks and say that, they probably do have a secret nuclear weapons. They're at least at a very low level researching what it would take if they had to put one together quick. And frankly, if they really wanted one right now, I'm sure they could make a deal with the Pakistanis, and there's probably some of those Russian suitcase nukes still flying around. I don't think they used them all during 9/11. So the bottom line is, if the Iranians really wanted a nuke, they could come up with one. It's not that difficult, and I think the Iranians are probably I don't know, 5 years, maybe 10, from being able to do long-range ballistic missiles. But here again, I mean, they could get long-range ballistic missiles from the North Koreans. The North Koreans are hot for foreign exchange money, so all this stuff is available on the open market. So all these arguments about whether or not Iran should have a nuclear weapon, I'm not sure how the world is going to keep that genie in the bottle. I really don't. I mean, I think we've been very fortunate that only Pakistan and India have joined the nuclear club here recently. There was some indication that the South Africans had a pretty aggressive program that they were doing in cooperation with Israel. But it appears they gave that up just before apartheid went away. So, I mean, the nuclear club is liable to expand as time goes on. I don't know how you're going to keep it from happening. The idea that the United States or Israel should just unilaterally take it upon themselves to go, bomb a nation into, the Stone Age because they think they might be capable of producing a nuclear weapon. That's a pretty scary proposition as far as I'm concerned too. What gives us the right? I think that we'd have a much higher moral position in making arguments like that if we didn't have such a reputation around the world for being the big bully on the block. The United States has not really presented itself very well. And one of the really disturbing points about this Israel spying on the Congress and feeding the Congress secret information that they really shouldn't have had access to is that Boehner, the leader of the U.S. House of Representatives, says he's baffled by the accusations that Israel might have done such a thing. Let me see. How much of Boehner's campaign was financed by AIPAC? Way too much. Way too much. So, do I believe what Boehner says? Yeah, I believe in the tooth fairy, too. One last item I did not get to that I wanted to discuss during the Rents broadcast, but just flat ran out of time. I make jokes about global warming and how it's all the probing gray space alien dudes. It's all their fault, because frankly, the idea of human beings and their activity causing global climate catastrophes, from my point of view, is World Trade Center 7 just out of the blue deciding to collapse in its own footprint. I mean, that's there's not much chance of that happening. But there are those out there who are fixated on the idea that the Earth is warming up and that it's your fault, and that the only way the problem can be solved is if you pay a tax. That's going to solve the problem. If you, Mr. U.S. citizen, don't open your wallet and pay yet more in taxes, the earth is doomed. And it's your fault, so you need to be punished. Yeah, that argument leaves me a bit cold. But you know, those on the other side of this argument happen to be in positions of power and authority. And you know how it is with folks who got power and authority. They will use that power and authority to remain in power and authority. so listen to this little ditty here. FEMA. Now, we all know who FEMA is. You know, FEMA is now attached to the Department of Homeland Security. FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. If you live down in Mississippi and a hurricane comes through and, you know, knocks everything down, FEMA's supposed to be the guys who come to your rescue. Now, in reality, FEMA doesn't come with truckloads of money and rebuild the devastated area. No. What they do is they come and they suck you in to a low-interest loan to help you recover. Yeah, so you had a mortgage on your home that got wiped out by the hurricane, and now FEMA comes in and gives you a second trust on your home at a very reasonable rate so that the boys up on Wall Street get their little piece of the action, even in cases of disasters. You know, I get a giggle out of people who think FEMA is this altruistic organization that just swoops in and rescues people in need. And everybody's got a, you know, in general, people have a pretty high opinion of FEMA as federal agencies go. I mean, they're not nearly as looked down upon as, say, the Bureau of Land Management or the Bureau of Indian Affairs or the EPA. I mean, most people think FEMA, well, you know, FEMA is a good bunch of guys. You know, if a hurricane ever comes in and wipes out my town, I just got to call FEMA. They'll come in and they'll help me rebuild. And, you know, FEMA's there. FEMA is the good guys, right? No. They're there to sucker you into a second trust on the piece of property that got knocked down by the hurricane. And yes, the bankers still get their piece of the action, even in cases of absolute disaster. But needless to say, FEMA has decided to deny funds to global warming deniers. Yes, you are now a global warming denier. If you don't buy in to the mainstream explanation, you are a climate change denier. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is making it tougher for governors to deny man-made climate change. Starting next year, the agency will approve disaster preparedness funds only for states whose governors approve hazard mitigation plans that address climate change. So, unless your state has signed on to the reality of you being the core cause of global warming, you do not get any FEMA goodies if you get whacked in the back of the head by a hurricane. Now, how's that? Is that what you pay your taxes for? See, they didn't say that, you know, those of you who do not subscribe to Human Claw's global warming, they didn't say that you can reduce your tax burden by the amount that you would normally be paying to fund FEMA. What they're saying is that you will get taxed but not represented. So, you know, if you don't believe the way we believe, if you do not worship at the same church we worship at, you will be denied FEMA assistance, even though you paid the same amount of taxes as everybody else, thinking your tax money went to provide that service. Now, what do you think of that? What do you think of that? Is that the way you thought it worked? I tell you, scariest words you will ever hear in your lifetime is, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Okay? That is That is like saying to somebody, I'm here to rape, pillage, and plunder. If you ever hear those words, hi, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. Pack up the kids and dogs and run. All right, guys, that's it. That was the last of my tirade for the evening that I had actually prepared. So I now look to the august body making up my my chat room to see what hot items in the news did I miss this past week. I mean, frankly, it was kind of a slow week for news. I had to do some serious digging to come up with some good items to bark about. But, you know, I mean, never a week goes by that there's not enough to fill a 1 hour program. You know, it's just usually I have, you know, about 20 minutes extra left over. So let's see here. So basically, you're being called out as a heretic. Yeah. I mean, if you don't worship at the Al Gore altar of human-caused global warming, you is a heretic. Yeah. I mean, we may just, you know, start burning witches again, you know, or hang you for being a denier. I mean, there have been some who have suggested that global warming deniers should be treated like terrorists, you know. I'm serious. Don't, you know, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, Hillary Clinton happy camps. Yeah, you know, I did read a couple of articles about that. But I couldn't find confirmation. I've heard rumors about FEMA camps too. As a matter of fact, I've got one near me that may be used as a FEMA camp. And with all these, the argument given when they refurbish some of these old military bases, and Alex Jones was out there, you know, whining and crying, saying this is where they're going to incarcerate all American citizens who won't buy into all the bullshit. The excuse the government gave is, oh, no, we're going to round up all the illegal aliens and we're going to use those as a place to put all, well, hell, you know, now all the illegal aliens, some, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 million, 30 million, who knows? You know, nobody's really got a hard number. Some of the real cynics out there say it might be as many as 50 million illegals are going to get all of a sudden, you know, made American citizens just like that. You know, the most optimistic in it, you know, say it might only be 5 million. So, you know, I don't know what the real number is. I've heard a lot of different numbers. Well, instead of being in these FEMA camps, you know, apparently they're going to get documents so they can work so that, you know, when they do drag all of us and put us in the FEMA camp, you know, they'll still have a labor force. As far as Hillary Clinton happy camps, you know, I don't know, man. You're just going to have to look into that one and make up your own damn mind. I can't really tell you. I can't really tell you for sure on that one. Lithium in the water supply. There are some jurisdictions. Not very many. You know, there are some jurisdictions that are pulling the fluoride out of the drinking water. That was good news. But there are some jurisdictions that one of the areas where they're talking about doing is like Detroit. Of course, you know, Detroit, they can't afford water anyway. But lithium added to the drinking water tends to make people passive. Basically, it's you know, you can still kind of see, you can still kind of talk, you can still kind of almost, you know, get your work done. But, you know, you just don't care about stuff. So, you know, you're living in a cardboard box under the overpass, but if you got enough lithium in it, you just don't give a shit. So yeah, lithium in drinking water, it is happening in some jurisdictions right now. Can't tell you exactly which ones because I don't know. There's another disturbing trend though, chloramine. It's basically a combination of chlorine and ammonia. Now, chlorine and ammonia, when you mix them, they make a toxic gas. I mean, they give off a gas very, very close to, it's not quite as deadly as cyanide, but man, I'll tell you what, it'll make your eyes burn, it'll make your lungs burn, it'll cause your nose to bleed. I mean, it's some nasty stuff. And I'm hearing that chloramine is going to be put into some of the water supplies. You know, I don't know. All I can tell you is that here where I live, the water that comes out of the tap could immediately be pumped into a swimming pool and be legal, as it's got enough chlorine that you can put it in a swimming pool and it's legal. Okay? And we do not drink the city water unless it's been run through a gravity filter. Matter of fact, we have two filters. We've got a particulate filter under the sink. We pull that filtered water off, and then we put it in the gravity filter, because the gravity filter takes out almost everything, including most of the fluoride. So I would not recommend to anybody that they drink their tap water. I think it's dangerous. I'm not real comfortable with the idea that I bathe in it, to be perfectly honest with you, because a lot of these chemicals can be absorbed right through the skin. So you don't even need to be drinking that stuff to be affected by it. Just bathing in it, having it come in contact with your skin, you can't absorb it. So it's not a good thing. But yeah, here again, what are you going to do? You're going to take a bath in bottled water? I'm not even sure the bottled water is safe. I may be a heretic, but I am not a moron. In Dallas and Baltimore, both, there are large empty fence areas south downtown. I was told that's for crowd control. Well, I can tell you that back during the Vietnam War period, they had portable cages, and these were big cages. I mean, these cages would hold, a couple hundred people. That they would just, the cops would, or I guess the cops had a contractor come in and erect these things. But when they would do a mass arrest, they more than once I was corralled into one of these chain link fence arrangements. Their only support on the ground is a big hunk of concrete. Okay, they bring in these big blocks of concrete. It's kind of like a Jersey barrier. And they set those things up in a row, and then they put poles up, and then they stretch the fence, and it's kind of like an instant cage. Now, they couldn't leave enough cops guarding us because as soon as the cops would corral up a bunch and stick us in the cage, those cops would have to go off to grab the next bunch of protesters, put them in the cage. And as soon as the cops left to go grab another bunch, about 20 or 30 of us climbed up on the fence and started rocking it back and forth, and we knocked that thing down in nothing flat. So and if they're really thinking in terms of the interesting, they bring in a group of 10, and 10 would be escaping out the back door as soon as they we were right back out there raising hell, and it got to the point where the cop was arrested. I think one day I got arrested 5 times in the same day. They'd put me in a cage, we'd knock it down. They'd put me in a cage, we'd knock it down. So the reason they're going towards these FEMA camp scenarios where they've got real honest to God prisons pre-staged, I would imagine is that when people do finally get fed up, they don't want to use something like they used for us back during the Vietnam War. They want to have something a little bit more sturdy to corral us into. Unfortunately, Shubas, you've got a very good point. I suspect back during the Vietnam War period, we had to contend with pepper gas, we had to contend with water cannons, and we had to contend with dogs. Okay, they were sicking dogs on us. They were pepper gassing us like crazy. And when too many of us would get together, when 8, 10, 12 of us would get together, they'd hit us with a water cannon. And you can laugh about being hit by a water cannon, but I'll tell you, I've been hit right in the face with a water cannon. That sucker will knock you on your ass. All right, so it will hurt you. Nowadays, I suspect if they were confronted with protests that were as aggressive as what we were doing during the Vietnam era, I suspect that police would probably be given a shoot-to-kill order. Now, I don't know that for a fact. Here again, you're going to have to consider the facts, look at what's been going on with the militarization of the police over the last 10 years or so. You consider and make up your own damn mind. But I'm of the opinion that if you had a major protest like what we had in Washington, D.C., where there were probably 50,000 of us out on the street marching and chanting and yelling and screaming, I suspect we would have been considered a direct threat to national security, and it would not surprise me a bit if nowadays a group like that wouldn't just be shot. It's bullets are cheap. Bullets are cheaper than FEMA camps. I can tell you that. Yeah, well, what you got is you got most of the police agencies making pilgrimages to Tel Aviv to get trained, and the Israelis train our cops to treat you as if you was a Palestinian, and that's basically why the police are such idiots nowadays. I mean, they don't know who they're dealing with. They think they're dealing with Palestinian terrorists. That's what they're trained. The cops have a us and them type attitude, and if you ain't one of them, then if you ain't one of us, you're one of them, and you got a target on you. Getting a phone call from your drunken mother-in-law by watching your first live show is not cool. Well, my apologies. I did not call her in advance and cause that to happen. Let's see here. Was Ernest Wayne? Yeah, the problem is you're assuming that there is still a U.S. Constitution and that the government still binds itself to its legal limits under the Constitution. The Constitution was pretty much done away with during the 1930s. The Constitution, it made no provisions for Roosevelt's New Deal. The Constitution, has not been followed by the U.S. government in many years. I mean, frankly, you could go all the way back to the Civil War. The South had every right under the Constitution to secede from the Union. I mean, it was guaranteed the states had that right under the Constitution, and the Act of 1871 pretty much eliminated that as a possibility. So whenever you hear talk show hosts talking about Constitution this, Constitution that, they are assuming that this government acknowledges its limitations under the Constitution. I would say that evidence shows that this government does not consider itself bound by the contract we, the people, signed with it back in 1776. I do not believe they consider themselves obligated to abide by the Constitution. I mean, how much evidence do you need? I mean, with Obamacare back, I mean, was any of that constitutional? This government does not consider itself bound by the Constitution. And when you've got a contract where one party is just standing there waving the contract and the other party says, screw you, do you really have a contract? Now, if the government does not hold itself to be bound by its limits and obligations under the Constitution, why do you? Why do you consider yourself obliged to support a government that does not consider its contract with you to be binding? Why are you bound? Well, you're bound to follow their rules at the point of a gun, okay? I mean, that's bottom line. I mean, they got all the tanks, they got all the attack helicopters, they got all the machine guns, maybe you got a 22 or a couple pea shooters laying around. I mean, obviously, even though we still have the right to keep and bear arms, our right to keep and bear arms has been so watered down over the last 50 years or so that I don't see how an armed revolution could possibly prevail against the overwhelming force they could and would throw at us. So, those who are out there preaching, armed revolution, that's a losing game. That is the battle they want you to fight. They want you to come out shooting. That would just oh man, there'd be a whole bunch of them up there, in D.C. They'd have instant wood if you guys just come out shooting, because all of a sudden the targets are well known. A few drones later, revolution done. All right, I think we have to take a hard lesson from Gandhi. Now, a lot of people think Gandhi was all about peaceful resistance and all that nonsense, but Gandhi did have his Sikh assassins who were taking out British officers, while Gandhi was preaching peace and love and harmony. And no, we're gonna do this peacefully, and we're gonna walk to the sea and make salt against British law, while his Sikh assassins were taking out British officers right and left. It's going to require a Gandhi-esque approach to finally, once and for all, bring about real change in the United States. I do not see us being able to effect change at the ballot box, because frankly, if you could really change something by voting, it would be illegal. So keep going to the polls and make your choice between shit and manure. I mean, that is your right in America. You get to make your choice between which group of thieves is going to be picking your pocket that week. I don't think we're going to be able to change things at the ballot box. If we come out shooting, you got a target on your back, and that'll be one very short-lived revolution. The only way I can think of to prevail is to take a lesson from Gandhi. I mean, a little old man in a diaper chased the largest empire in the world at that time out of his nation. And you need to study up on how it was done, because that is, and don't think it's going to happen overnight either. So if you're thinking Superman, Green Lantern, or little gray anal probing space alien is going to come down and save you, leave a quarter under your pillow. Maybe the tooth fairy will leave you something. Maybe leave you a new set of false teeth. I wonder if the tooth fairy works in reverse. When you get to be my age, if you leave a quarter under the pillow, I wonder if it gives you a new mouthful of teeth. I could go for that. Well, in theory, our founding fathers did not want a democracy, because a democracy. I like the visual image of democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. Okay, that's democracy for you. In theory, we were gifted with a republic. In a republic, the individual has rights that cannot, under any circumstances, be taken away, even by the majority. One of those rights was the right to keep and bear arms. The intent was that you should have the right to keep and bear military-grade arms. In theory, you should be able to have a tank parked in your driveway if you can really afford one and really want one. Machine guns. For the life of me, I can't understand why American citizens are not allowed to have machine guns. I mean, they can in many other nations in the world. And here in the United States, you could indeed own a machine gun right up until I think it was 1931. Americans commonly had machine guns for almost 50 years after their invention. And then all of a sudden one day, a bunch of ganglanders up in Chicago did something called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, hit the news. It was a big one of these shock moments, and boom, all of a sudden, American citizens could no longer own machine guns. Inch by inch, a little bite at a time, they have eroded all of your God-given rights. These were not rights granted you by the government. These were rights you were born with, that they agreed under contract to respect. As soon as they stop respecting your rights as they contracted to, they're illegitimate. They have no, and then it's up to you to decide, why the hell are you still supporting them? Well, the mafia works along with the Fed. Actually, from my point of view, the federal government is the mafia group that won. I mean, if they're in government, they're government. If they're vying for government, they're just a mafia group. I mean, the Bush crime family. I mean, for crying out loud. I mean, we're run by organized crime. Most governments in the world are just a group of criminals who've gone legit, or, for the most part. All right, guys, we're half hour overtime. I'm tired. It's been a long day. I really need to wrap it up. But any last big issue? Was there any other really big item in the news this past week that I just totally neglected that we should discuss before I bag it for the evening? I got time for maybe one more item, and then I got to get out of here. We're a bunch of Muppets. I hate being called a Muppet. Well, what they're not telling you is that the United States actually has the largest deposits of rare earth metals, but we've chosen not to mine them. We have them in federal preserves where, that's saved for the future. China has the largest production of rare earth minerals. They're actually mining theirs and producing refined product. But the United States has the largest reserves of these what's called rare earth minerals anywhere in the world. So that's that here again. There's the truth, and then there's the real truth. Capturing, I'm not so sure. There's only a few materials that we have a hard time with. Cobalt, we have a hard time with titanium, and we have a hard time with lithium. Those strategic minerals, are not readily available in the continental United States. But many of the rare earths, like the rhodium families and many of the others, are available in vast quantities in the desert Southwest, areas that are currently under military occupation. Man, I think we've even got tremendous deposits of upsidasium and unobtainium. Yeah. The fact of the matter is we are not currently mining and refining. Neodymium, yes, we have tremendous reserves of neodymium. Oh man, we got all the unobtainium you could ever obtain. But the areas where these materials are readily available are off grounds to mining right now. We've basically put those in federal preserves or reserves or whatever, and or strategic reserves, I think is what they're calling it. And so we don't allow anybody to mine or refine here in the United States. So, and if we can, if we can get it cheap from the Chinese, why bother? But if we ever had to, yeah, we could produce most of it. Yeah, well, that was actually a couple months ago. I reported on that, Shubas. There is actually what they didn't close the last lead mine. The last lead mine was closed a few years ago. but the last lead refinery was closed down just last year. I think it was third quarter of last year, and yeah, I did report on that at the time. The fact of the matter is there's still a tremendous amount of lead readily available. Lead is a byproduct of gold and silver mining. It's usually found in deposits where copper is mined. Believe it or not, there is a lot of lead that results from the mining of coal. And of course, the United States is one of the biggest coal producers in the world. And when you mine coal, there's a lot of lead. And usually they have to separate the lead out so that when you burn the coal, it doesn't put a whole lot of lead in the atmosphere. It would be pretty hard to totally cut off all the lead produced by the United States. But what you can do is you can close down the refinery where they produce the end product. And that has indeed been doing so. So now there are lead trailings being left over from coal production all over the United States in big heaping smoldering piles. It's like big piles of poo that would normally have been trucked away to a lead refinery where the lead would have been refined and turned into fishing weights and bullets and the insides of lead acid batteries and all the other things that lead is very useful to do. So what we're doing now is the one benefit to this is we're doing a lot of lead recycling right now. I mean, right now, a worn-out battery core is worth a good chunk of change, because, the lead inside is getting harder and harder to get. I'm not sure about Al Gore's zinc mine. Not really sure about that. Well, that's going to have to be it for me, guys. I'm done. I'm tired, and I still have to process this thing to get up on YouTube. So I'm going to have to call it a night. I do want to thank everybody for spending their Tuesday evening listening to me bark at the moon as if I knew what the hell I was talking about. But for all of you, please do consider what's going on in the world. Think about it. And as always, make up your own damn mind. Certainly don't believe me. Certainly do not believe the pap you're fed on the mainstream news. Have a good evening. We'll see you next week.
Calling out to you. Won't you turn, won't you turn around?